Protestant theology, because he is a Protestant. His mention, for example, of Satan is a classic example of this. Of course, we have classic texts, don't we? We've mentioned a number already, but let's just mention as well Dante's Inferno. Remember those famous lines from Canto 24 when he is, of course, in Bulgia 7, lines 46 and following, "Up on your feet, this is no time to tire." Of course, your favorite villain comes to mind here. You can jot down any number of your favorite villains. Why are they so valuable? We were asking this question earlier in the lecture. Think about Beowulf as a classic epic that will begin with the villain Grendel, show us how bad the monster is, and then bring Beowulf ready to go. Think about all of your superhero films, your superhero comics. Is it the case most often that we begin with the bad guy or the villain first, or the monster first? We see that first, and then, of course, the introduction of the hero becomes more profound, right? Finally, level B. Let's point out, let's not be too afraid to ask tough questions about this poem. That's the reason that we're studying, and it's also the reason why the poem continues to resonate and to attract. We've already pointed out some questions, like, for example, if it's wrong of Moloch to demand the sacrifice of children through fire, then what about, for example, that Passover story that's referenced at line 482, right? What makes, for example, the death of some children acceptable, other children unacceptable? How about this one? Is it true that when nations send their children off to fight in wars, that the nation is asking those children to be sacrificed? Think about the greatest novels that point this one out. All Quiet on the Western Front, Catch-22, of course, Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5, right? I mean, the Children's Crusade is the subtitle even of that novel, isn't it? What about Red Badge of Courage even? The notion that children are sent into war and there they die or they become men, but what kind of men? Usually, of course, those children are male, not always, right? We can think obviously about the theodicy question as it relates to this whole thing of child sacrifice, right? And of course the whole notion of free will, and the Christian theology that will suggest that God sacrifices his own son, and yet in our poem, for example, we'll get to it later, Christ will volunteer for that sacrifice, which then makes that maybe more palatable. Of course, we immediately think in the Old Testament as well of the sacrifice of Isaac by his father Abraham, although it doesn't actually occur. Right? Number 2, at 3b, the question of Satan as hero. We can go back to those lines as we were reading them a few minutes ago and look at them one more time. I mean, they deserve to be studied again. He says it. Hail, horrors, hail, he says. Satan, infernal world, and thou profound as hell, receive thy new possessor. I'm here, he says, and I'm happy to be here. It was my idea that I got thrown out of heaven, and I'm awfully happy that I'm down here. One, he says about himself, receive thy new possessor. One who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. Well, let's pause. Just ask the 3B question. Is this the act that we constitute greatest respect for? The individual that says, no matter what the situation during the contest, I won't give up. I refuse to lose. I'm not giving up. Don't we in our culture usually kind of think of this as a good thing, not a bad thing? He continues by saying the mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. Very interesting. The idea that we construct in our opinions of things whether they are good or whether they are bad. Remember, of course, your Hamlet lines, right, from Act 2, Scene 2. We mentioned it already. There is nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. What about, of course, Achilles' comment from Odysseus 11? I was referencing this earlier, right? Book 11 of the Odyssey. Line 489 and following, you'll remember that when Odysseus meets Achilles, he says, I tell you what, Hades is no fun down here. I would much rather be a servant and alive than to be down here and be a dead hero. Which seems to be kind of the inverse, right, of what Satan is saying here. How about this one? 3b, a time you had to fight back or decide to acquiesce and give in. Right? What's the best way to do that? Finally, what about all those speeches? Right? What is it about our culture? So, for example, we elect an individual, yes? That individual, of course, now has won political office. Great. But why do we have to have a speech about it? Like, what's up with that? Or before, for example, a sport contest. We've been trained by the coach. We're prepared to go. Before we go out, however, for the contest, what must always occur? Oh, yes, we have to have that motivational speech. What is it about that? Of course, we think about any of the great speeches of epics. Think about, for example, every time Beowulf gets ready to go off to fight, what does he give? You got it. A speech. What is up with that? And let's ask this question. Is it ever the case in a culture that a politician who's a really good speaker, now immediately we think of our Plato's Republic and the declension of state arguments in Book 8 and Book 9, don't we? A good speaker can stand up. Remember, Plato said this is the hallmark of the tyrant, of the despot, who can stand up and can talk so well that people will just kind of follow this speaker into whatever. Notice how gifted, right, Satan is with his language. He's good at rhetoric. He can talk. And he can talk to all these defeated angels who just got jacked by God and say, no, it's not over, it's not over. Let's go to work, let's go to work. Of course, finally, Machiavelli's prince, you'll remember in our study, Machiavelli says, the greatest prince is the one who knows how to lie, deceive. Absolute liar, great at it. The one that can hide that, in fact, he is lying. Well, Satan, of course, personifies this in many ways. Well, on to Book 2 now, and that conversation in hell between these demons. Of course, the ultimate plan will be, let's send Satan to Eden, where Satan will then meet with Adam and Eve, and of course, force them, or challenge them to fall, and in the process of them falling, of course, Satan will become victorious. We'll, of course, get to this in our study of Book 2. I hope you come back to join me. Thank you.